Good afternoon, class, and welcome to part 2 of our narrative writing lesson from last week. Thank you all for your participation last week. Again, this is going to be a continuation from last week's lesson, and it's going to be very important for you all with the optional grade improvement project. We're going to be talking about what that project consists of, the standards that are attached to it, and also skills and things that you're going to need to do in that project. So today is going to give you clarification, and it's also going to give you extra practice before you start moving into your project. So let's go ahead and jump to it. So what is our focus? Now, the learning targets that we're going to go over today are the 2 learning targets that are attached to your project. So the first learning target, which we have had a lot of practice on in class, which is RL.7.1. Remember, when you see RL, that means you're reading literature. So this is a literary standard. So it cites several pieces of textual evidence to support analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text. Now, when we say explicitly, that means word for word. Remember the line that we use in class, I said what I said. It is directly stating what is meant. So what the text says explicitly, word for word, as well as inferences drawn from the text. Remember, when you're drawing inferences, that means it's going to be your background knowledge plus your information from the text. That's going to give you your inferences. So for example, if I tell you that I eat Chick-fil-A every day for lunch, what inference can you draw from that? So some examples would be, I like Chick-fil-A, or I love eating Chick-fil-A for lunch, or I'm hungry. Those are types of examples that you can use when we talk about drawing inferences. Specifically, in this case, we're going to be drawing them from the text. Our second learning target is going to be a writing standard, W.7.4. Produce clear and coherent. Those are synonyms. They mean the same thing. Produce clear and coherent writing in which the development, organization, and style are appropriate to your task, your purpose, and your audience. So what this means is that your writing, what you produce, is very clear. It's developed. That means that you have put it together. You've organized it, and it follows a certain style. Certain poems follow a certain style in this case, and are appropriate to your task, which is what you are doing, what you plan to accomplish, your purpose, which is your why, and your audience is who you're writing to, who's going to be reading it. Now, why are we learning this? Citing evidence is important when you're trying to prove and support your conclusion and your answer. That's going to be the same thing for anything in your ELA classes, your math classes, science, and social studies. You're always going to need evidence to support your answer. Tell us how you got that. What information are you pulling that gave you your thoughts, your ideas, your opinions, your answers? So citing evidence is extremely important in ELA because you're going to be reading a text and telling us what you got from it or how you got your answer, and then being able to go back in the text to show us where you got the information from. Second reason, writing skills will help you with letters of interest when transitioning to high school and college. When you're applying for different clubs, different programs, different schools, some of them are going to require you to write a paper telling them why you want to join that organization or that school or that club, why you should be accepted. You're going to have to use those writing skills in order to get into those types of things. You're going to need to be able to express yourself, express your ideas, answer prompts, even on your 10 ready assessments. Those are things that are going to be implemented and that you're going to need to practice on, that not only will they help you in school, but they'll also help you in real life as well. So this is a glimpse of the optional grade improvement project. This is straight from the PDF file that I have attached down below in the description box. So that's where I'll post it. I also post it on Class Dojo so that you all can get access to it. But this is directly from that packet. So this is the 7th grade literacy project for sensory imagery in poetry. Now, you have an awesome English teacher that has already prepared you for this. We went over poetry. The first 2 lessons, if you need to refer back, those videos are still up. We've gone over this in class, and I'm also preparing you now before we get started with the project. So you always have those resources to go back to for those 2 lessons that we did at the very beginning of our YouTube series. And you also have me. You can reach out to me on Class Dojo. Those of you who have my Google number, email, however way that you want to communicate with me, I'm here if you all have questions or you need help. So let's look over this rubric together. So the estimated time you see is either 120 minutes to 130 minutes. Then you have your grade level standards. Those are the standards that are in your project. Those are the standards that we're going to be going over today. Now, you can also have someone to support you with the preparation for activity 1. I would be considered one of those people because we're going over this now to kind of clear up any misconceptions or any questions that you may have on the front end. So let's look at the questions that we're going to explore. How do writers use sensory imagery to create meaning? And in what ways can you use sensory details to share with a reader what you experience? So in our last lesson, when you're telling a story to someone and you want them to be able to see, feel, taste, or even imagine what the touch would be like of certain things that you're describing, you will use those sensory details in your writing to help the reader get that picture or that image in their mind. We're going to go over a lot more on what sensory details are and what sensory imagery is later in this lesson. Now for your directions. In this project, students explore how writers use sensory imagery as a literary device to make text more interesting. First, students will use their senses to explore explore known objects and write a poem about it. Second, students will analyze how this literary device works in Pat Moore's poem, Echoes. That's the text that you're going to be using for your project. Finally, students will revise their original poem to incorporate what they've learned about sensory imagery. Ideally, each activity will be completed on a separate day, so you do not have to get all of this done in one day. I will share with you all the due dates and further information later on after this lesson. So what is sensory imagery? Sensory imagery is a literary device. That means that is a tool. Remember, we talked about different poetic toolboxes. This will be one of them, one of the tools that poets use or writers use to be able to engage a reader's mind on multiple levels. Now, sensory imagery explores the 5 human senses. This is something that we talked about in part A of this lesson. So you have your sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. So that literary device is going to be able to use words that appeal to those senses. So using words to describe how something looks, how something sounds, how something tastes, how it feels, and how it smells. So examples, the first one, I could hear the popping and crackling as Mom dropped the bacon into the frying pan, and soon the salty, greasy smell wafted toward me. So in this sentence, we know that the mom is in the kitchen cooking bacon. The writer of this sentence decided to include the sounds that they heard when the bacon was cooking. Also, his mom, how we see her, how I knew that she was the one cooking it is because he explained it. She dropped the bacon into the frying pan. I can visually see that by the words that are being used. And now we have smell. The salty, greasy smell wafted towards me. It came towards me. I got a nice whiff of it. So here we have sensory imagery here where we see that the writer is appealing to our senses with sight, sound, and smell. Now with the second one, the floral scent of her perfume lingered in the air as she glided across the room. So here we have description words that describe her perfume. It's sweet and it's floral. That means it smells like sweet flowers. Her perfume lingered in the air. That means it stayed in the air a little longer after she walked past them, after she glided across the room. Now you could say she walked across the room, and you could just imagine a regular person casually walking across the room. But using glided gives it a more elegant, it gives it a more interesting way to look at it. It's very smooth. She smoothly walked across the floor. So here we have different words again appealing to your imagery. So we have smell, and in this case, sight. So let's practice. Which one of the 5 senses is used in this sentence? The thunder clapped loudly, shaking the house. So is it sight, smell, taste, touch, or sound? Which one of the 5 senses is used in this sentence? The thunder clapped loudly, shaking the house. Is it sight, smell, taste, sound, or touch? The correct answer is sound. Evidence that we can pull from the sentence, the thunder clapped loudly. If something were to clap, we have a sound. If it's loud, we know how the volume of it. We know that it's extremely loud. It clapped loudly. So that's appealing to our sound. Now let's try another one. Which of the 5 senses is used in this sentence? The warm, juicy burger felt like heaven on my tongue. Now this one can be a little tricky, but think about what the sentence is saying and what the sentence is describing. The warm, juicy burger felt like heaven on my tongue. What are they trying to get you to understand? What are they trying to describe? So what sense is it appealing to? Sound, sight, smell, touch, or sound? Which are the 5 senses? Sight, smell, taste, touch, or sound? If you said taste, that is correct. Remember, this is a tricky one. The warm, juicy burger felt like heaven on my tongue. He's trying to get you to understand how it tastes, not so much how it felt physically, but it felt like heaven on my tongue. Remember, that is a form of figurative language. If something were to say it tastes like heaven, it felt like heaven. Those are things to try to get you to understand that it feels good or it tastes good. It was warm. It was juicy. That is more appealing to taste. I know that was a little bit tricky, but we'll get a little bit more practice on it. So here, using sensory imagery, that means appealing to those 5 senses, describe the picture that you see here. First, pull out any details that you notice, whether it's with things in the garbage, things outside of the garbage, things around it. Analyze this picture and then describe what you see, or what you might smell, or what you might feel. So using sensory imagery, describe this picture. If you saw this picture and you were trying to describe it to someone else, how would you describe it? I'll give you my example. The sour and putrid smell of the rotten food in the trash can made me sick to my stomach. It was horrible. Flies swarmed around it, swarmed over it like bees to a honeysuckle plant. Fish guts and expired food spilling out like an overflowed bucket of water. So here, I'm appealing to the 5 senses. Sour and putrid smell. Something smells sour and putrid. That means it is very foul. And we know that because it says it's rotten food in the trash can and the smell is so bad that it made me sick to my stomach. Those are words or sentences or phrases that you can use to describe to someone how it smelled to you. Then I describe the flies that are over the trash can. Flies swarmed over it like bees to a honeysuckle plant. Now, occasionally you might have seen a rose garden or flower garden where you see bees are just swarming around for nectar. Now we have here flies are swarming around for food. And I explained what it looks like. Fish guts and expired food spilling out like an overflow bucket of water. We have juices that are on the ground to the right side. You have an octopus tentacle that's hanging out. You have a banana peel on the floor. I use that comparison. So if we have a comparison here, what is that? Brief pause and look back at our poetry. What type of figurative language is a comparison using the words like or as? So here I said expired food spilling out like an overflow bucket of water. I'm comparing the expired food spilling out to an overflow bucket of water. So what type of figurative language am I using here to make that comparison? If you said simile, that is correct. A simile is a comparison using the words like or as. Again, we have here that I'm comparing the overflowed trash can to an overflow bucket of water. Now you see how those devices, those different types of figurative language, those descriptive words, those details add to your writing to give people an image. You always want your reader to be engaged. The best way to get them engaged is give them something to picture, give them something to look at. If they don't physically have a picture, make the words that you write give them one. So, what did you come up with? I want you to share your sentences or your story down in the comments below. If you don't have a YouTube channel or a YouTube account and you can't comment below, feel free to send it to me in a Class Dojo message. I will post the best example for each class period, well, each class section on Class Dojo. So I will post the best one from 7.5, 7.4, 7.3, and 7.7. So share that down in the comments below or send that to me in Class Dojo. Now, in your grade improvement project, remember this is optional, you're going to be looking at a poem, analyzing it, and telling us how the sensory imagery, which is appealing to those 5 senses, how does that help the reader with their purpose, what they're trying to say? How does it make the writing more interesting? What does it do for the writing? So the example that we're going to look at today, this is not the one that's in your project. This is just our practice. So this poem is by MARILYN Singer. It's called April is a Dog's Dream. So we're going to look at this poem and see how this author used sensory imagery to paint a picture and what it does for her writing. And then we're going to answer some text-dependent questions afterwards. Now let's take a look at the poem. April is a dog's dream. The soft grass is growing. The sweet breeze is blowing. The air, all full of singing, feels just right. So no excuses now. We're going to the park to chase and charge and chew. And I will make you see what spring is all about. Now, let's read this a second time. Remember, good readers always go back and reread the text. We've read it once all the way through. Now let's go back and look and reread to see exactly who is the speaker. What is this poem about? And how do we know? Remember the what, the why, and the how. That's who we're going back and looking for on our second read. Take notes if you need to keep track of your thinking and your ideas. I always encourage you all to start taking notes. That is going to be extremely beneficial to you now when you're in high school and especially in college, because they do not give you PowerPoints all the time. So I'm preparing you all early. So let's go back and take a look for a second time. Remember, we're going to look for who the speaker is, what they are talking about, and how do you know? Who, what, why, and how do you know? April is a dog's dream. The soft grass is growing. The sweet breeze is blowing. The air, all full of singing, feels just right. So no excuses now. We're going to the park to chase and charge and chew. And I will make you see what spring is all about. So the first thing I want you to point out to me, what lines in the poem use sensory imagery? What lines in the poem appeal to the 5 senses? Sight, smell, taste, hear, or sound, and touch. Which lines in this poem use sensory imagery? If you picked these lines, you are absolutely correct. The soft grass is growing. The sweet breeze is blowing. The air full of singing feels just right. So here we see that the author has appealed to those senses to get the reader to understand what they're experiencing in this poem. Now let's go back and read it for a third time. This time, we're going to be answering questions. The questions that we're going to be reading. Now that we have our questions, remember I told you all, always read after you've read twice. Go back, look at the questions that you're going to be answering based on the text, and then go to the text. Once you've read the questions, you know what you're looking for the next time that you read it. So let's look at the questions. Question number 1. Who is the speaker in this poem? Cite evidence from the text to support your answer. So when you tell me who is the speaker in this poem, tell me how do you know by using only the evidence from the text. Second question. What does the speaker mean by the air full of singing in the highlighted line in the poem? So this is where you're going to have to use your context clues and draw inferences. What does the speaker mean by the air full of singing? Analyze that. Break that down for me. What are they trying to say here? What are they trying to get me to understand? Then your third question. What is the poem about? After reading this poem, remember, look at the title, read the poem, the context, what the text is about. What are they talking about? It tells you what the overall meaning of the poem is. So what is this poem about? What is the purpose of this poem? So those are the 3 questions that you're going to be answering. Now we can go back and read the poem for a third time. April is a dog's dream. The soft grass is growing, the sweet breeze is blowing. The air all full of singing feels just right. So no excuses now. We're going to the park to chase and charge and chew. And I will make you see what spring is all about. So this is your assignment this week. This is your practice. I need you all to participate. Participation is going to be extremely vital for you all, especially those who are deciding to take advantage of this optional grade improvement opportunity. Remember, this is a chance for you to add 3, 4, or 5 points to your overall grade for quarter 3. This is optional, but this is going to be your practice before you start doing that project. I don't want you all jumping into something and you don't know what you're doing. That's the purpose of this lesson. So make sure you share this with your classmates or someone else from a different class section. Let them know to go look at Miss Johnson's YouTube page, even for those students who are not on my roster. Anybody in the 7th grade can look at these videos and get the support that they need. So make sure you pass the message along. We'll be doing the same thing. So with these questions, I want you to submit your answers to me on Class Dojo or in an email. Do not post your answers in the comments section. Only send them to me on Class Dojo or in an email. Do not post them. I do not want anyone to see your answers. Send me your answers privately. The answer to these 3 questions using this poem, April is a dog's dream. If you have any questions, you all know how to reach me. Feel free to reach out to me. I will post the project packet and any other information for your parents as well on Class Dojo. So be looking out for that. Now that is all for this lesson. Thank you all for tuning in again. Make sure you stay on top of your schoolwork, and those of you who are taking advantage of this great improvement opportunity, please keep an eye out on my Class Dojo page. That's where I'll be pushing out information and contacting your parents. So that is all for today's lesson. I will see you all in the next one.